hey Joe, it's Saturday morning. How's it going? How was your week?
It was a good week. I had probably the most productive week I've ever had. We got a lot of projects done this week, and awesome. I'm just thrilled that it's Saturday.
Awesome. So Joe, I got a question that's been burning me inside all week. I think you're gonna love this.
Okay.
So, if you store your thing on an iCloud or on a cloud, can you be hacked?
Oh, good question. So it was about, I think maybe 3 years ago now. I'll have to go back and look at the date. Jennifer Lawrence had all of her pictures in the iCloud, and she was hacked.
Oh, wow.
Like, we're talking nude pictures for Jennifer Lawrence. They were all hacked. Then there were several other stars. Their iCloud data was hacked. They caught the guy. Basically, the stars did not have good passwords.
Okay.
So this was nothing more, I don't think, than just someone guessing creatively on what the stars' passwords were.
Okay.
But the answer of that is the cloud is basically secured by your identity.
Okay.
So however strong your password is, all the data in the cloud is easy to access as the strength of your password. With one exception, you can turn on what's called multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, where you get a text message. That adds quite a bit of security, because then the hacker would have to basically
have your phone,
or there's a couple of hacking techniques. One is called a SIM card swap, where they go into the AT&T store, they do a identity theft against you by convincing AT&T that they're you.
Oh, wow.
And they say, hey, I just, I need to move on to this new phone. So they basically, get in there and convince them to move the phone number on a different phone.
Interesting.
And guess what? Guess where that text message goes?
Yeah.
It goes to that new phone.
Right.
So they have the password. Now they have a phone that can receive your text messages. No. So now they're able to get into that cloud account.
Wow.
So that actually happened to one of our employees.
Oh, wow.
One of our employees got hacked that way. The CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, I think.
Oh, wow.
His own Twitter account was hacked about 2 months ago.
So yeah, if something that a hacker really wants to do, they can
do it.
They can do it. Okay. How secure is an iCloud? So say, for instance, your computer system at your company gets hacked, but you have everything on your cloud as your reserve. So if your computer system at your job gets hacked, is your stuff on your cloud, is that safe too? Or
so it's only as safe as the password, because a lot of people use the same password at their work that they do for the cloud. So once the hacker gets the work password, they usually guess that against the cloud account, and then they can go in there and delete that. So that actually happened to a customer of mine. They had what's called the Barracuda cloud backup. And Barracuda is famous for their email spam filter. You probably see their posters at the airport and stuff, number one to spam, all that stuff. And they also make a backup device in the cloud. Well, the backup device in the cloud, it's the same thing with iCloud. If you know the username and password of the user, you can go in and delete those backups. So what happened is the customer got hacked. The hacker then logged into their Barracuda cloud and deleted the cloud backups. Oh, wow. And so after the hacker put the ransomware on all the machines, there was nothing they could do. They had no backup. They had to either pay the ransom or they lost all their data for all time, permanent data loss.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. So kind of transitioning from that into what is phishing, what is malware, what is a virus, because you hear all three of those, and I'm gonna be totally honest. I don't know.
And I think a lot of people don't know. And so this is perfect for this, podcast. This episode is to kind of get into, terminology, defining terms, right? So phishing basically is a form of social engineering. It's basically someone trying to con or convince you that they're someone different than who they are. They're pretending to be someone different, and they're trying to basically convince you to do something that they want you to do. And so what they're doing is they're sending you an email that'll say, hey, this is FedEx, and here's the link to track your package. And they're hoping you click on the link. If they can convince you to click on the link, then that link is either going to take you to a website that has malware, and we'll talk about what that is in a moment, or it's a link that's going to take you to a place that's going to try to convince you to type in your username and password. So they'll have a fake login screen, and you'll look at it and you'll be like, okay, and you type in your username and password, and it's like error. And you're like, oh, that's weird, and it doesn't work. Well, it didn't work because it wasn't a real login page. It just basically had a text form to capture your username and password, right? So that's so phishing basically is an email to convince you to give away your username and password, and that's another way of how the hacker could have gotten to Jennifer Lawrence's iCloud account, is if he sent her an email and he pretended he was Apple. And he said, hey, this is Apple. Your password has expired. Click here to reset your password. So she clicks on the link. She goes to his website. And on his website, it looks like Apple, And she types in her iCloud username and password. So he's now recorded her password. And now he can log in as her because he convinced her to click on it. So that's phishing. Phishing is usually to steal your username and password, or to try to get, malware down on your system. So the way I kind of think about it in my mind is like, phishing is when it's like the attacker will send the email to 1,000 people, and he, it's kind of like, imagine you're on this lake, and there's 1,000 fish in the lake. You throw the lure in there. You're not really sure who's going to bite. All of a sudden, someone clicks on the link. Now they got you. So phishing, like, just imagine.
Just reeling them in.
And they don't know who's gonna click on it. It's like a broad attack over a broad base of people.
Right.
But the statistics are that anywhere from 20 to 50% of people will click on a link.
Wow.
So if the attacker sends it to 1,000 people, we're talking 200 to 500 people
that will click on
that
link.
He's going to get their password.
Wow.
Yeah, it's that bad. And now I went up to a company in LA. I think it was on Monday, and they basically told me that they have been able to get the click rate down to like 1%. And I said, how do you do that? How do you get your click rate down to that low? And they said that they simulate phishing attacks to their employees. So they send their employees phishing attacks, and if they click on the link, they train them. They say, no, that wasn't a real email, that was phishing, be more careful. Yeah. And because they've drilled that into their employees,
now they're looking for it.
They're looking for it, and they're more careful on what they click on. So they went from a 50% click rate to a 1% click rate just by training and doing this over and over again, which is cool.
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
They want that link.
Now, we talked, I think, in one of the previous episodes about one of the most famous hackers of all time, Kevin Mitnick.
Yes.
So his company is a phishing company. So when you hire his company, it's called KnowBefore. They help you send those phishing emails to your employees.
Oh, okay. I see what he does. So you can train them.
That's right. So his company focuses on education, training you on to recognize those phishing emails. So imagine that. This guy, he was in a federal prison, okay? And now he's a multi-millionaire teaching people the techniques that he did that got him in prison.
In prison.
Isn't that interesting?
That's very interesting.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. That kind of, you got to kind of know the tricks of a hacker.
Yeah.
To understand what they're doing and what to look for. Because from what I heard, like some phishing, it could say FedEx, but it'll look weird.
Sometimes it looks weird. Now, the pros, the really, really good ones, you can't tell the difference.
Oh, you can't tell the difference?
No, they have techniques that they do in the link, in the hyperlink, to make it so that when a user looks at it, it looks like a legit link. I mean,
oh, wow.
Just to give you an idea how good they are, the Russian hackers, they were able to convince John Podesta, who was the I believe he was the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton's campaign, right? So John Podesta. John got this email from Google that looked like it was from Google, and it said that there's a problem with your password. We think you've been compromised. We need you to reset your password. Mm-hmm. So he thought Google was telling him, hey, there's an issue here with security. You got to fix this, right? So what does John do? He forwards it to his IT department. Says, I'm not quite sure about this. Can you guys look into this? He did. The IT department, the skilled pros, right? They look at the link and they're like, yeah, it looks good to us. They forward it back to him. They're like, yeah, it's good. We think you should probably click on this link.
Oh, wow.
So he clicks on the link, and it's a phishing email, and he gives away his username and password to this Russian hacking group. Now, what did the hackers do? They bought a domain name with like zeros instead of O's. So so basically, to the naked eye on a computer, an O and a zero look extremely similar. So when it said Google.com, it looked like Google.com, but they swapped out some characters. So even the IT department was fooled.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So now, after that incident happened, that was in 2016, I believe.
Yes.
Google came out with something called a security key, a physical key. We talked about that last week, right?
Yeah.
It's this little chip that you put in your computer, and when you click on a link, instead of typing in a username and password, you have to touch the key. And then the key, what it does is it looks at the link and it compares it with what it's allowed to use. And if it's not a perfect match, it will not release the password. So this trick that the Russian hackers did that fooled even John Podesta's IT department, that would not work with what's called a YubiKey or a FIDO2 security key. It has this thing called UTF, which stands for like unphishable authentication. Google rolled this out to they rolled it out to all their employees worldwide because they had a internal phishing problem against them too. They got hacked. So they rolled this out. They claim that they have not actually been hacked since then with these physical keys. Jeez. They're about $20 each. It does take a little bit of training to show an employee how to use them, because when you plug it in, you have to like register it. You have to go through like a little process. But once you do, that would have prevented Jennifer Lawrence. What? It would have prevented John Podesta. And basically, it's the best defense against phishing today. Not every website supports it. So Facebook, Twitter, they support it, but the iCloud does not yet support it. So it's not yet fully adopted yet, you know? So the best guidance is like use the text messaging, because that's better than nothing. That's better than just a password. But just know in the back of your head, you got to be super careful, because you know, if someone really, wants to get in there, they'll probably get in there. But at least with the security key, man, I'm not aware of a way right now to that a phishing email would be able to defeat a security key. That right now, that's the best.
That's the best. Awesome.
Yeah.
So my second question is, what is malware? What is the difference between a malware and phishing?
Yeah. So malware is like what would be on the website that the phishing email wants you to download on your computer. So let's say you get the phishing email, you click on the link, now you go to the website. The website, it either wants your username and password like we talked about, like John Podesta and Jennifer Lawrence, or B, it wants you to download a program on your computer. Once the program's on your computer, it can do a lot of things. It can steal your passwords, like all your banking. Like if you do online banking, it can get those passwords from your web browser. You know how like when you go to a web browser and you fill in your password, it says, would you like to save your password?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Hackers can get those passwords. So if you get malware downloaded on your machine, all those passwords that you've saved in your web browser, the hacker can get all those passwords to all those websites.
That's very interesting.
Now, that's why I think malware is actually more dangerous than phishing. But in order to get the malware on the machine, oftentimes you have to click on that phishing email to download that malware. The other way that you can actually get malware is something called malvertising. Malvertising is when you go to a website. I'm going to bring up an example of this here. Have you seen those advertisements that's always like, this one crazy trick is only known by people in Irvine, California?
Yeah.
You know, and it has these like girls that are like handcuffed, and it's, you know, have you seen those like ads where it's like, you know, this weird like dragon fruit, and it's like this one fruit will, like a lot of those ads are what's called malvertising. It's an advertisement that takes you to a website that has malware that will be downloaded to your computer. And so when you're on social media and you see ads, you don't want to click on the ads because those are hackers who have rented, not all the time, but many times, many of those are advertisements that have been rented by hackers. So hackers can rent ads to download. So that's called malvertising. Malvertising.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy, right?
That's crazy that they go to those lengths.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's cheap. Those ads are not that expensive. And if you think about it, if they can get your banking password, they get what's called a return on investment. You know?
Yeah.
So the ad cost them 20 cents, and they were able to do a $500 transfer out of your. And a lot of the times, what they do on those banking transfers, they'll do $10 transfers or $5 transfers because you won't notice.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at your checking account at the end of the month, the little $5 fee, you're like, maybe I went to the gas station and bought a Snickers. I don't really know.
Yeah.
So they'll do that for years. And if they do that for 100 people times $5 a month, I mean, they're doing okay.
They're doing great.
And so they pepper those ads out there, hoping people click on those. So one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about today is that, like if you imagine a line being drawn down the middle, you have the good guys and you have the bad guys. And so for every one of these concepts, there's there's two sides to it, right? And in security, we call the good guys, the defenders, the blue team. And that's the term used. So you'll hear the blue team. Right. The blue team are the defenders. They're the good guys. Okay. The red team, they're the ones pretending to be the hacker so that the blue team can be better prepared so that when there's a real hacker, they've kind of seen the techniques and tactics and procedures.
They know what to defend.
They know what to defend against. So the red team, they're constantly learning about the latest hacking techniques. They're constantly... there's like a certification called offensive security. And there's, you can go in and get this certificate, to be a certified ethical hacker, for example. And so that would be a position as a red team member in an IT department. Those people will also be called penetration testers. They're constantly trying to hack in, right? Right. So, like, when we think about, like, just the terminology, the blue team, they have to basically be able to study red team activity to defend against it. The red team, they have to study the defensive capabilities so that they can learn how to defeat those things. So it's all about knowledge. It's all about gaining knowledge on, both sides. So each side has to learn the other side. Right. to be able to battle. Right. Some companies, Microsoft, for example, I went up to their cybersecurity center. So they have a dedicated facility that is basically like this, like this room here. And there's computers and there's people sitting around all these monitors, and they're just constantly looking at hack attempts. Once a year at Microsoft, they unleash the red team against Microsoft. And the blue team never knows when it's going to happen.
But it's happened.
It's going to happen once a year. And it's a legit attempt by the red team to go at Microsoft. And the blue team's not allowed to know when it's going to happen, and they won't know if it's the red team or a real hacker. That way, they're always on the lookout for
hackers,
right? Because they know that their red team is going to be attacking them, so they're constantly looking for them because they don't want to fail that.
Yeah, they don't want to fail that.
So that is having your posture up and ready, on guard,
all the time.
Can you imagine, like, if you're like defending your home, right? And if you knew, actually, the Bible talks about this, right? Jesus says that if, the man knew when the robber would come break in his house, he would stay up all night. He'd be like ready to defend, And so that's like the blue team at Microsoft. They're ready to go all the time. They're constantly looking for the attack,
Yeah, they're prepared for any attack, and they don't. Well, I think I can imagine the blue team don't care who if it's the red team or if it's a real hacker, they know they have to defend that.
That's right.
Wow, that's very interesting.
That's interesting, right?
That is interesting.
And that is by definition the mark of, I think, a mature company's security posture. If a company is at that level, then that's the highest level you can really get to in security, is when you have those two formal teams doing war games against each other. You're going to have a pretty tight system. Absolutely.
But if you look, so outside of companies like Google and Microsoft, we'll take like a company like Ford, or we could take a company like Kellogg. How would they defend against cyber attacks and stuff like that? I know they have an IT department.
Yeah, great question. A lot of these companies do have dedicated cybersecurity people on staff, but many of them, if not most of them, also augment or completely outsource cybersecurity to a third party, what's called a security operations center. So the security operations center, basically it's a room full of people that are constantly looking at the alerts coming in. So an alert would be basically an event where someone is trying to send phishing emails to all your employees, and so the analyst, they see all these emails and they go, "Oh, this isn't good. We're being targeted," And so if the company like the Kellogg or the Ford, if they don't have someone sitting and looking at the monitor, looking at those threats 24/7, right? So typically it's 4 shifts.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it's and usually it's not uncommon for those 4 shifts to be at different data centers around the world, so that way those employees can work during daylight hours. So that's sometimes called follow the sun support. So as the sun moves around the globe, it hits India, so it's like 8 o'clock there. That's nighttime here, and then as the sun moves around, then it hits our data center, and then they take over. So there's like data centers around the world.
They're just constantly,
and they're just constantly looking for those threats. So you can outsource your security operations center, so that way, as a company, you're not having to hire and find the security people and staff them 24/7
yourself. Yeah.
It's hard to find people that are willing to look at a monitor all day, looking at all the alerts. Ironically, that's one of the things I also want to talk about maybe on the next episode, which is how to get into a security career. That's the entry level position, is to be looking at the alerts. The SOC analyst is one of the easiest entry level positions to get into in IT. I think I mentioned on one of the last episodes, I mentored a gentleman who got a job with no experience, no previous IT experience at all, and he got a job as a SOC analyst for one of the most respected government institutions in the United States. He's been there about a year, and he just got a job offer for a 60% pay increase.
That's a blessing. That's amazing.
Isn't that intense? So awesome. If you put in the time on that first, just a year in, and you do really well, and you learn, then your options really open up.
Then they grow.
Yeah. And my guidance to him is, when I first met him, I said, look, put in a year there. Don't leave before that, because that's not going to look on your resume that you're hopping around. Put in a solid year and, check your options. I mean, you may love it where you're at. You may love your manager and your team, and you may see an amazing career path to stay where you are. That's fine. You don't have to leave. But, if you put in a solid year and then you check your options in the market, see what's out there. And sure enough, he did, and he got a offer for a 60% pay increase.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. So I know last year I was working for the Marriott, and I don't know if you heard about that big phishing attack that happened to them.
I did. I know a little bit about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was working there at the time, and they were all scrambling around, and so I know our IT department was in South Carolina. So if I had, changed my password or whatever, I had to contact them and, let them get on my computer and do the thing. And then, but they didn't know my password, so I had to put my own password in. But yeah, so I remember that big one that hit Marriott where they were afraid that customers'
data was accessed.
Was accessible.
Yeah. So the thing that I remember about the Marriott breach is what made that breach make headlines was that the hackers had been in there for 3 or 4 years.
And they didn't know it.
And that's pretty unique. The average amount of when a hacker makes it inside of a company like Marriott, the number of days is called the dwell time. So the dwell time average is 200 days before they're caught. So 3 years is highly abnormal.
Wow.
But it's not actually the record. The record, as far as I know, is Citrix. Citrix is a software company that we learned in February of last year that by the FBI that Citrix had been breached by Iran for 10 years.
What?
For 10 years.
10 years?
10 years. And it was because Iran, they didn't care about Citrix. What they cared about was that Citrix was selling software to the Department of Defense and the White House.
Yeah, so they were nervous about Iran getting into the White House.
Yeah, so Iran, they couldn't attack the White House directly. So they got in indirectly by hacking Citrix's software. And so when the White House bought the Citrix software, the software that had the Iranian code got installed, and that allowed the Iranians to get into those networks.
That's crazy.
Because they actually, implanted software inside of the Citrix software.
10 years. So sometimes you can get in a virus or a malware can get into your computer, and it can just be there so long that you don't even recognize it.
That's right. Some of the malware can basically go to sleep and wake up when the attacker wants it to.
Okay.
So basically, they're let's talk about the difference between a malware and virus.
Yeah. What is the difference between those two?
So the original kind of term was virus.
Yes.
That's kind of the historical term for code that an attacker writes to execute something that's unauthorized, something you as the computer owner don't want to have happen. So it's malicious, and that's where malware gets its name. It's malicious software. So the terms are often used interchangeably. To be honest with you, malware, virus. viruses typically spread.
Yeah.
Meaning that malware may be designed for that one computer and it doesn't spread from machine to machine. A virus typically has the capability of spreading to other machines on its own. And when it does that, it's called a worm. So,
oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so think about malware as like a standalone PC, and it's just going to take over that PC. It's not going to spread to another computer. A virus has the capability of spreading. For example, from USB drive to USB drive, that would be a virus. So you plug in USB, the virus loads itself, and then you're like, hey, I got this game. You give it to a friend. Now it's on his machine. That would be a virus. Now, when it actually goes over the network and attacks all the machines on the Wi-Fi network, that would be a worm because it's more network-based than, say, USB-based. So that's, basically a decent understanding of the three.
Oh, the three?
Terms. Yeah.
Okay, wow. I didn't know.
The most devastating worm that you probably heard of was called WannaCry. So WannaCry happened in 2017, and it spread to like 300,000 machines in the first hour or something. It was like it spread very, very quickly. We talked about Marcus was the guy who found the back door to stop the spread of it. Yeah. And then remember he was indicted by the FBI.
Because they felt that he spread it.
Well, they didn't think he spread it, but they actually recognized that he had written some previous code that he wrote like a banking Trojan, allegedly, that would be able to steal your banking passwords.
Oh, wow.
So he wasn't responsible for WannaCry. He was actually the hero who stopped WannaCry.
But then he
But then the FBI was like, something fishy about this guy.
Yeah. So then they look deep.
They look deep into him and they're like, hey, you're busted. We think you wrote this.
No, he's sitting there like, man, I just helped.
He literally, so he lived in England and he flew here to a security conference and they wouldn't let him leave the country.
So he's still here now.
Good question. I don't know the status of his current case, but he's active on Twitter. So unless our prison system lets people use phones,
I don't think so.
Right? So I think he's probably either on probation or because it wasn't like a violent crime or anything, like the big malware is more like a, they call it a white collar crime, right? So,
yeah. Nowadays they might change that in the future because I think since everything is getting more computerized, I got a feeling they're going to change that law.
Yeah, especially now, like if ransomware is taken out of hospital. Now we're talking about actually affecting people's lives, right?
Right.
So,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Someone can die from that.
Yeah. So. Yeah, it's not just money. Yeah.
So, So how do you first start becoming a cybersecurity person?
How do you get into cybersecurity?
How do you get into it? What's the first thing you should do, or I should do? Because since I'm starting, what's the first thing that I should do?
So that's actually, why don't we do the next episode? Why don't we dedicate it to that? Mm-hmm. And so this would probably be, a good point to kind of wrap this episode up. So next week we'll talk about how to get into cybersecurity.
Yeah, let's do that. So hey, listeners, have a good day. Thank you, and to the next episode.
Thank you for listening. Bye.
Bye.